everyone's going through the same crap differently. It's not easy, but you've got to just crack on, don't you? And make the most of everything you get with that.
And there's no reason people going through it today have to go.
I'm happy being a CHD patient. It's a hell of a journey.
It's good to have people that get it. This is The 1% Heart, a podcast about the millions of people living with congenital heart defects. In this episode, we're going to discuss the power of telling patient stories and compare the US and UK CHD care experience. Today's guest is Stewart Liang, a UK-based advocate who helps patients tell their stories and empowers them through his platform, Heart to Hearts podcast. Heart to Hearts is now into its third season, and he's released more than 30 episodes with detailed patient stories. And I will say he's also a close personal friend, because he is the man that brought me into the CHD community years ago. You can follow him on Instagram at Heart to Hearts Podcast. That's heart, number 2 hearts. And you can listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Before we start, quick disclaimer, nothing here constitutes medical advice. These are our own stories and opinions. I also want to include a trigger warning as we are going to discuss medical related problems. Listener discretion is always advised. With that out of the way, Stewart, hi, thank you for taking the time.
Hello, Jason. It's been a long time since we've spoken. Like, we speak most days, but like in this environment.
Yeah, in a formal interview.
Exactly.
I'm excited to talk about the US and UK experience. But before we do that, for the people that don't know you, can you give us some background on the podcast, how it came about, and what you're trying to do?
Yeah, basically, I believe it would have been 2021, I think, because it was 2020 was the COVID pandemic, and I was off work because I was shielding from the virus. They were really effective over people who were born with congenital heart defects like myself, and I think it got into the second year of the pandemic, and I was still not working, so I needed something to pass the time. And I always fancied doing a podcast, but like I didn't know really what to talk about. Like, there's things that are always talked about, sports and basic media stuff. So I was like, well, why don't I try and do a heart one? Talk to other CHD guys, and luckily I have a good group of friends.
So you're saying
in the UK.
You're saying the pandemic, the free time in the pandemic, helped motivate you to create the podcast that has now been around for 4 or 5 years.
Basically, yeah, it was just a time killer, really. But I was amazed. It was great because it took off way beyond what I ever expected.
Yeah, I've met a lot of people through your podcast. I spoke to the Kime sisters from Heart Charge not too long ago. Your social media is what introduced me to the Adult Congenital Heart Association. So it has, I can tell you right now, your podcast has taken. Now,
and that was, I wasn't even really the aim. That was what was quite good. It was just to find out more about people with CHD. And like I said, I started off in the UK, but it ended up going a bit further afield, as we can see from this, speaking to Americans and people in Australia even.
And just to give our listeners a bit more context, so Heart to Hearts will talk to a patient or a patient family member, sometimes a panel, and go through their stories in great detail, 45 minutes to an hour. And what that does is it allows patients going through those problems today to see that someone else has gone through it and come out the other side and pick up any tips, tricks, and hints on how they got there. It's kind of like a cheat guide for a video game.
Yeah, pretty much. It was, the idea was, I don't know how to word it, because I was like, you listen to things and it's very not even matter of fact, but it's more this whole numbers and all really factual, and of course medical stuff should be factual, but I felt it needed a bit more laid back, lazy. But
it's
if you know what I mean,
giving people a full platform without that added pressure of formality, where you can tell your story without having to try to clean it up for the wider audience. That's what I appreciate about it.
Because I know so much about my medical condition, and even then, when people ask me things, I'm really basic with what I know, because I don't know the like millimeters of my like valves are crushed and whatever. And I feel that everyone was like, oh yeah, let's just talk about it and see how you felt during these times. And it seemed to work. And it was great. And I even get now people messaging me from older episodes that they've listened to and said, oh wow, I didn't know other people felt like that. And it's great to hear other people are going through the same thing. And that was like really, really great for me to hear all that.
I think that's a great tie-in. So your podcast is an international presence. You've spoken to American and English guests in the UK and the US. I remember from our episode a long time ago now, I told you about the American experience on my end, and it was horrifying. Now, since then, you've probably done another 25 episodes with Americans. Based on your own care journey and transitioning through care in the UK, what do you think are the starkest differences in your experience and someone in the US?
From what I've seen, like, and heard from speaking to loads of like Americans, it was all brought up. Obviously, the main one is the cost. That's always
And
like
just,
every episode.
just
I think it's talking American. So there's always chat about cost of everything. Really,
and for context, how much does your care cost you?
nothing. If you want to put it like that, we pay. Like we have the NHS, which is like the National Health Service, and it's in the UK, but it's Scotland and England separated as well. And we pay that out of our wages, basically. A small contribution of our wages go into a larger pot for everything in the UK. But basically, like all my prescriptions, all my surgeries, all my stays over in hospital, I can go in with like no worries that I don't pay for that, like outright. Whereas if you went in for an X-ray, you're rocking out $500 maybe. I don't know what the numbers, but like
It depends on
breaking up.
deductible. It could be a $50 visit. It could be a couple hundred if I have to get tests. Do you think that if you had that cost barrier, you'd be less likely to seek out care when you're experiencing issues?
Yeah, it's interesting because like there's the like talk of over here privatizing the NHS, which would all mean people start having to pay for surgeries. And for like a patient like me, I don't know if anyone else's experiences that I take like 17 different pills a day, and I get 6 monthly checkups and things. And then you'd be like, well, maybe I'll have to cut some of that out, because I'm not going to be able to afford to pay those things.
That's a terrifying thought.
But then that's the kind of thought you guys go through all the time. Am I right?
Yes, it is.
Just recently got a defibrillator, put in headphones. I had to wear the wireless earbuds now because you're not allowed to have a wire hanging. You've got a headset with a microphone, don't you? So like the wires going across, we're not allowed to have that with the defibrillator in.
You're not allowed to have that with I didn't realize that.
Well, I heard that until I read the notes. They just saying I wasn't allowed to do that. I allowed to have that and have your phone like a certain distance from your heart and stuff.
The things I never think about. It's terrifying.
Exactly. And now I have to think about it all the time. And it's like, oh, I'm running scared of magnets, man. I'm running.
I mean, it's kind of, it's like, I can't even think of an apt comparison. It's just, it sucks to think about that they will be, and probably after 6-12 months, it becomes second nature to you. But it's weird to think about the things that become second nature.
Yeah.
Like the things that we get used to.
Yeah, it's actually it's only been 4 weeks. Will be 4 weeks this week since I've had the procedure, and I'm still thinking about it a lot. But I've like spoken to the hard charge girls a lot leading up to it, and even after, and they've been great for all that kind of stuff, the advice and all that.
They both have implanted devices, right?
That's right. Yeah.
And you're doing okay now?
Yeah, I'm great. I'm actually probably in the best shape.
What happens?
Chips are exaggeration.
Like what changed that made it so you had to get one of those installed? Was it just a time thing? A new problem pop up?
Nothing. No, it's a purely precaution.
Purely precautionary.
Yeah.
They operate on your heart for precautionary reasons?
Yeah, maybe we should have talked about that when you were talking about the pricing of things. So I've got whatever cost of the devices in me, and they did it because they've like read my ECGs and were like, people with tetralogy of Fallot maybe are more likely to have like what happens with the cardiomyopathy patients later on in life. So they were like, well, let's put one in them now and hope that it doesn't happen.
So your doctors decided that because TOF patients are more prone to irregular rhythm and arrhythmia issues later in life, that they can implant
That's research. Again, this might be, again, I'm not saying that this is fact, but like
right, but that's what motivated
that was
them
what they
to,
put across to me. That's what they said to me. It was, we've noticed this in other patients at this age.
and they
Maybe we should
and
jump the gun and put it to figure it out.
your doctor just decided like this is the best course of action. Let's do it. He didn't have to get approved by.
Well, yeah, there was a panel, like, so it's like take patients to like a meeting. Well, I don't turn up to the meeting, but the like they take and discuss patients at like a large meeting. So that's different.
A panel of doctors,
like cardiologists. Yeah.
So there's no like for me, I'd have to be arguing with some insurance representative with little to no formal medical training about why this is necessary, and they'd have to go through a lot of procedures to justify that kind of expense. And you're telling me that because of the way your healthcare system is set up, when they have research that says doing something like this is important enough in preventative ways to prevent future problems from occurring, they can go ahead and do it. And I think that's a big difference between the US and the UK systems is the ability for doctors to do what's best for their patients without thinking of that added. Is this going to get approved by insurance? Is this going to get hoops are we going to have to jump through?
Get all this shit for free, but you guys can't. It feels like really bad. I don't like saying it like that. But,
it's like survivor's guilt.
Yeah,
like survivor's guilt. Last weekend we lost a really, really, really important person in the patient family advisory board. A big advocate for legislation, just a great person all around. And it really hit me hard because, I mean, this guy was a beast. He was smart. He knew his shit and he knew his shit. Like he would go to, like he would push for legislation. And he was like, he was a force to be reckoned. And it goes like, you're talking about feeling guilty. I mean, I feel guilty because I'm healthy. You feel guilty because you have proper care. And I'm sure this is the same for any lifelong condition. The people that do better feel guilty. It's still hard to digest.
Yeah.
Like I feel bad. My heart is doing okay now.
Yeah, I know what you mean. And I've had that, like, another incident when I was younger. I think it was maybe 16, 17. And I was just before I went to adult care. And I was in, I was just getting a stent put in or something. And there was maybe a 5-year-old kid in there waiting for a transplant. And like, I came home from my stent and like, I remember just being in tears because I was okay. Like I came out, I was all fine. But this kid's sitting in hospital, not knowing if he's going to make it to the end of the week. Like I wrote to the family. I sent a letter down to the hospital when I got home and wrote to the family and said, I've been thinking non-stop, and it was all about organ donation. Even though my organs are probably useless, I signed up for organ donation, like we can do here in the UK. And they ended up getting back to me and saying, this is amazing. Thank you for that. You didn't
tell about the organ donor part, right? Just I want to make that part clear.
Oh, no, I didn't say I was going to be an organ donor.
It's two separate things. You wrote a letter to the family, and you went
and
signed up to be an organ donor because it motivated you.
And I remember, maybe I can't remember how long ago it was after. It was a while after anyway. I remember my mum coming through with our locals, like the national newspaper, and it was a headline with "Boy receives heart," and it was that boy that I'd met in that hospital, and it was like, holy shit! I was like, that's amazing. Like I was over the moon that he managed to get that. It's interesting because I've never heard from him again, and I'm hoping, I don't know how old he could be now. I was 16, 17, 38, so that's like 20 years. So he would be in his 20s easily.
He's probably out there thriving.
I know, hopefully.
But I do want to just squeeze in here that I I think a big part of what stopped me from speaking out for so long, what stopped me from seeking any kind of community was I seemed fine on the outside. I had my open heart and I had my stent and everything was wrapped up by 5 years old. And after that, I didn't have another surgery till I was 17. And it was tough to see myself as someone who needed community and support. I still should have sought out that community because it's stupid to limit yourself for what? Why is my, just because someone else has it worse doesn't mean I don't have an issue. And if
No,
a little bit of
exactly.
community helps, hopefully between your podcast and mine and everyone else we know who's out there banging the fucking table, getting more attention drawn to this, kids will realize that they could have every problem in the book, or they could have a minor one that they didn't know about till they were grown. Come talk, because you'll find someone with the exact same type of situation or a similar enough situation. It's good to have people that get it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
And
I've said this a million times on different panels and different interviews, but we can't talk about CHD care without talking about the socioeconomic divide of care, which might be a little bit different if we didn't have to. Well, it would be a lot different if we didn't have these barriers to entry of paying for doctors and being on insurance and what have you. But, we could talk about insurance all day. What, aside from that kind of overarching topic, what were the biggest differences you've noticed between UK and US experience? Is it the US is spread out and it's more difficult to find that community, or is it something more tangential that I'm not thinking of?
the difference would, well, from what I've heard from other people, that it's quite hard to find doctors. I'm guessing for you guys, it doesn't carry over quite as well to certain, like, probably so much from like child to adult, but even if you were to need to go to a different type of surgeon for a certain operation, you would need to find that person yourself. Is that right? Or am I made up
You,
information?
you can get referrals if one doctor finds something, they might tell you who to go to, but it's really hit and miss. If I was having eye issues and I didn't talk to my cardiologist first, I'd have to go find my own eye doctor, for example. Yeah, but it is a bit difficult to transition through care. I think a large part of that is how spread out we are in terms of population density, because these centers that support CHD care are so far apart. It's probably a big part of why the third of patients are lost to care before their 18th birthday.
Yeah, and so because like you're saying, the size of the US. So are we talking like? Because you realize that Nashville, so that's the state of Tennessee, right? So does that mean there's certain rules in that state for care as well? Is that a thing? Is there different rules for different states in certain care?
It
So like if
depends
you
on
went to like kind of flagged on a state like California or something, it's going to be totally different from what you can do
it
in
depends on
Tennessee.
insurance. They might cover catastrophic problems like emergency services, but it would start the process over of finding a doctor covered by your insurance. And just for some additional context, every time my insurance changed growing up, whether my mom changed jobs or the job she was at changed what provider they used or what plans they were on, but almost once a year, I'd have to change cardiologists just to keep one on insurance.
That's
I
crazy.
think
Yeah,
I had
like
7 or 8 different cardiologists before my 18th birthday.
yeah. Whereas from being from born to 18, I could say I had that I remember anyway, two cardiologists in that time. And then when I went into adult care, I was told, this is your
The only time,
cardiologist.
the only reason you changed from one cardiologist to the other is your first one retired.
Pretty much, yeah. That was
Yeah.
basically it. And then they had someone come in and they took over your notes, and that was it. You didn't have to go look for them or anything. It was just like, this guy's retiring, this woman's taking over. She'll now take you to about 16, 17. Actually ended up being longer. We only meant to stay care for kids until they're 16, but they were able to hold on to me till I turned 18. And then I went to the adult hospital, but then again, it was just like, that's where you're going to get seen now at this hospital, and this is your cardiologist, and he just took over. And I've had two since then, since I was 18, and I'm now 38.
That's, continuity of care it sounds very, I'm very jealous. Let's leave it at that.
That's it. It's weird to hear that because it's Because it's all like for you guys, I'm guessing you've got the trust. There's like I've had the same cardiologist. He'll he or she learns your story and everything about you, and they can like figure out how to care for you. Whereas what you're saying, you're changing all the time. You could be getting different diagnoses every time you go.
They'd have the same records, so maybe not different diagnoses, but
Well,
it's
you know what I mean.
definitely a
Like
different level of
different ideas.
understanding. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I didn't really get a full explanation of everything that was going on until I was over 18 and I asked a cardiologist. And it seemed like everyone just assumed the last person had explained everything to me in great detail. So they never bothered.
Oh, okay.
So I was just going, all I knew is I had to keep finding doctors and they would figure it out. But there was a long time where I didn't really know what was going on, just that I was healthy and I had to stay healthy. I had to keep getting checked.
It's just such a worry for you, like all over there with that.
Yeah, no, I agree with you on that. And it's a different experience, but let's go back for a second. And you're talking about going from a pediatric to an adult cardiologist. That transition for you was just, they sent you to a new doctor once you reached an age threshold.
Yeah, like say I was at it was called the York Hill Children's Hospital in Glasgow, which is like 2.5 hour drive from where I stay, and they were like, "You're now going to go get seen at this other hospital, which was like an adult hospital," and they were like, "And you will go see this cardiologist, and they'll take over from you." And that was
And
it. And you went
was it a CHD focused cardiologist? An adult
yeah,
CHD
that's all cardiology. It's like straight into that. And then you get your notes, and like you say, they got everything there, and then they just carry on.
How hard is it for you to get a visit scheduled when you need to see him?
For me, I'm very like it's interesting because I'm quite a different well, not a different exception. That's a really stupid word to use, but like because the clinic I'm in Glasgow, I have like a number to like their nurse specialists, whereas I can phone that up any day of the week and just leave a message and say, "Hey, it's Stuart. Can someone call me back?" And within 2 days, someone will call me back, and they'll be like, "What's the problem?" I'll explain the problem, and they'll be like, "Sure, I'll speak to your cardiologist and go find out what they're saying about it." So within a week, I can see it. And even then, if I really got a problem, I could phone up and say, "Hey, I need to see you guys. I'm not happy with what's going on right now." And they would be like, "Yeah, okay, come down now." And they would come down that day and be seen
That day.
that day.
All right. So
Extreme circumstances, obviously, as well.
right,
They would
right.
do that,
But
yeah.
extreme circumstances, not like an ER visit. Extreme circumstances, like I'm worried about this right now. What can we do?
Yeah. And I wouldn't be able to, like, if I knew that our local services couldn't handle it, and I would rather be seen by them, they would just take me in.
Now, I'm trying to formulate this question as I go, so bear with me. You were diagnosed with your condition very early in life, right? And you're you're in your 30s, you're a parent now. When you think back to what happened growing up and how your parents had to get you into care, make sure the right things were done, how would you? And the point I'm trying to make here is the stress on the parents from either having a continuous care system with the records all collected versus having to find new doctors, having to come out of pocket to pay for a lot of visits and get them organized with different insurances and changes. How do you think it would have been different for your parents or if going through it if they had that extra layer of bureaucracy in their way?
It would have probably added big, like, a load of stress, like unbelievable amounts. I was it was like within days I needed to be seen
Days of your birth.
and taken away, blue lighted, in an ambulance away to the main hospital to see what the problem is. If that was to be then saying, "Oh well, you can't actually do that because you don't have insurance," like that would just be like crippling to the
Well,
parents.
I'll be fair here and say that when a person is sick and dying, the hospital will take care of them. The issue is the bill that comes afterwards.
Yeah, so it's like they wouldn't obviously leave anything happening, would they? They're going to treat them, and then they're going to be like, "Hey, now give us what, say, $1,200, $1,500."
Yeah, it's amazing. I even now I have people that will get hurt and they will take an Uber to the hospital instead of an ambulance because ambulance rides are so expensive.
I've never had to have that experience of calling an ambulance and waiting that time with an emergency. But I've known people to be having long waits for ambulances. But then, less what bill afterwards.
You're right. It's not medical advice. Just we're sharing stories and stories we've heard, and I've heard some very sad tales of the bills that patients can get out here. Let's end on somewhat of a happier note. You've been doing your podcast for a long time now. You've met all kinds of people. Tell me some of your favorite memories so far. The biggest differences, the smallest things, whatever they are. Just tell me what you think about when you think back.
From doing my episodes,
Doing your episodes and the community you built around it.
they continue, well, they all seem to do it with a smile on their face. And I always found that really amazing. Like, I was speaking to someone that had a 1-year-old or under 1-year-old going through surgery, and I was speaking to them, and they were only months through it, and they were so, because they were speaking to me and learning that how well we've all done, and it gives them the hope, and it was just great to hear so much positivity. And then obviously, there's one of the guests I actually just saw a post before I came online that he does rock climbing. I don't know if you remember that guy. I can't remember. I lost him as well. Yeah, Ryan. Yeah, but there was Bob, the Aortic Adventure. Man, that guy is insane. Like that, amazing what he does with having had open heart surgery. Well, he's climbing free rock climbing in Vegas and all that kind of stuff all over the world, and it's amazing to hear all these things. It's just been such an adventure for me, in my sense of just speaking to people. It's just been great, and obviously getting to meet you, and now you're taking over this podcast, and I can't wait to see what comes from this.
If I can have half the staying power yours did, I'll be very happy. But something that did remind me of, talking about how positive the patients are. I was at a conference, a cardiac neurodevelopmental outcomes conference, and they're going through statistics. And they're talking about the optimism and the lack of depression in patients going through heart failure. When they talk about quality of life, they say their quality of life is good. Whereas patients with no medical issues said that their quality of life was not as good at a higher rate. And I'm getting numbers offhand, and I apologize if I'm misquoting the stat. But the takeaway was people actively dying of heart failure were still very optimistic about life. We're still happy. And it goes back to what you said about that positivity. I think that having a reminder of your mortality in your chest makes you a lot more aware of how lucky you are each and every day. It makes you enjoy those things more.
Can I just add as well, actually?
Yeah.
Another thing that was great I really liked was the fact that you went to Elliot's wedding. That made me. That was unreal. You guys didn't even know each other.
I've met so many great people through your podcast, but Elliot Katz is one of the best people I know. And now he has a wife and a daughter, and I watched all that come about. And I really appreciate all that you've done and everyone you've introduced me to. It's amazing how the community comes together.
When I saw when I heard Elvis was getting married, I was like, that's great. And then seeing that you were going and you were traveling, seeing, we see each other through Instagram along, same with Elliot, and seeing the stories of that weekend. And it's look, Justin's actually getting closer. It's going to happen. We're going to meet up. And it was it happened. It was great.
It was great. And we've remained connected before and after that. I helped him with interview prep back in the day. And he, when I had to break up with a girlfriend a few years ago, I called him for advice. So that kind of connection and community that you fostered is exactly what I'm hoping to do here. But my episodes are shorter and very, very focused on, this is bad, let's change it. For example, U.S. healthcare is a little bit wonky. The UK does it better. What can we do here to help CHD patients through their journey? Big questions that have no good answer, but a good conversation starter.
It's great because you come out, it's there must be a way. There must be something that can be.
Yeah, and even if it's the little changes that make a big difference, it's the tipping points. It's making minute changes in care, improving quality of life bit by bit by bit. Yeah. And this podcast I'm doing here, I'm trying to bring in people that have all these different experiences, because if we can make just one patient's life just a little bit better, I'll feel like it was all worth it. Because I never had the community growing up, and it was always there. I was just not aware of it.
Everyone's so positive. Everyone's going through the same crap differently.
And no one ever told. And there's no reason people going through it today have to go along. So it's funny and a little sad when I say I learned about the American CHD community from a cranky Scottish bastards podcast. So, Stuart,
Thank you.
we've covered a lot, but something I just do want to sneak in here. Everything you've gone through, the surgeries, but all the community you've created, at this point, what does CHD mean to you?
There's two main things: is community and like a good solid group of people trying to get through life, basically. And it's hell of a journey is the other side. It's not easy, but you've got to just crack on, don't you? And make the most of everything you get with that. And like I say, the community is the main reason I'm happy being a CHD patient.
Beautiful, beautiful line to end on. I'm happy being a CHD patient. We've just got to crack on, and the community is full of positivity. Stewart, it's been a pleasure having you. And that was Stewart Liang, the creator and host of Heart to Hearts podcast. You can follow his Instagram at Heart2Hearts podcast. That's heart, the number 2, hearts. You listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. As always, if you have questions or comments on this episode, you can reach out to me through our website, 1percentheart.com, all spelled out, or email support@1percentheart.com. You can also message us on Instagram at the CHD podcast. Thank you all for being here. Talk soon.